Welcome back to another in our series of the parables of Jesus. Our parable today is the parable of the barren fig tree of Luke chapter 13. We'll begin reading in verse 6. And he told this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came seeking fruit on it and found none. And he said to the vine dresser, Look, for 3 years now I have come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and I find none. Cut it down. Why should it use up the ground? And he answered him, Sir, let it alone this year also, until I dig around it and put manure. Then, if it should bear fruit next year, well and good. But if not, you can cut it down. As a young boy, I recall every spring planting our garden. Everything in the garden was ordered according to how much ground it would need to thrive. Plants like lettuce and radishes and carrots were close together, relatively speaking. Others, like peas and potatoes, tomatoes and beans, needed a little bit more room. And then came the vines, like pumpkins, watermelon, and cucumbers. They needed much more room. Each according to their needs. No room was wasted. Later, we used a method known as square foot gardening and raised bed gardens. You could squeeze in more plants per square inch with these methods. Again, knowing how much each plant demanded for space was critical. We also had an orchard with apples and pears. I had my own personal favorite tree that appealed to my taste buds. Then there were those trees that year after year would give those shriveled up, bitter fruit. One thing I couldn't figure out is why we didn't chop down those trees and put in better ones. They only used up space and our energy. Maybe the best thing about them was they were good for the deer. Of course, we didn't grow fruit commercially, so it wasn't a critical thing to use every square inch of space. But here in northwestern Michigan, growers are much more intent on getting every possible piece of fruit they can, whether apples, cherries, or grapes. I'm amazed when I drive by a farm that has torn up what appears to be perfectly good trees and piled them for burning. And then they plant new trees. They know when an orchard has reached its peak and is in decline. Jesus uses a parable about just such a decision in our passage today. It is interesting that Jesus uses more than one reference to fig trees in his teachings. In his discourse on the end of Jerusalem, he tells his disciples in Matthew chapter 24, verses 32 through 33, From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branches become tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. Many people have mistakenly identified this with the second coming of Jesus, but the context is the destruction of Jerusalem. Jesus tells of the second coming this way in Matthew 24:36. But concerning that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. There would be signs that would precede the Roman army laying siege to Jerusalem in 70 AD. But there would be no signs given for the second coming. Even Jesus did not know that. Another curious use of the fig tree occurs in the last week of Jesus' life on earth, in Mark chapter 11, verses 12 through 14. On the following day, when they came from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing in the distance a fig tree and leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season of figs. And he said to it, May no one ever eat fruit from you again. And his disciples heard it. In each of the three references to the fig tree, there is an implied judgment against the Jewish nation. Our parable today not only shows the judgment, but the patience of God towards fruitless Israel. The fig tree is an oddity among fruit-bearing trees, for the fig tree bears fruit along with the leaves rather than later in the season, such as apples and cherries and pears and the like. It is also an oddity to find a fig tree in a vineyard. Rare, but not unheard of. In our illustration, it is used to represent something small among a larger area, the Jewish nation. The vine dresser is Jesus. All authority was given to Jesus, so it is up to his discretion how to go about the process. John 5:22 we read, "For the Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son." Some scholars have noted the unusual reference to the 3 years as being that time which Jesus spent on earth preparing for the advent of the kingdom, or the church, that would be instituted on the day of Pentecost. There seems to be no fruit coming from the Jewish nation for 3 years. Jesus relates this well when he said in Matthew 21:32, "For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and prostitutes believed him. And even when you saw it, you did not afterward change your minds and believe him." Jesus pleads for 1 more year to give special attention to it, so that it might be given another chance to bear fruit. The condition is that it must bear fruit. What we see is the patience of God, but we also see the justice of God. We might do well to visit the 5th chapter of Isaiah to see how much God has done to provide a good environment for his vineyard. When God plants his vineyard, he expects, yes, demands growth. Isaiah 5:4 tells us, "What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it? When I looked for it to yield grapes, why did it yield wild grapes?" One might wonder if God still demands fruit from his vineyard, the church, today. Have you read Matthew 25? And Lord willing, let's meet here again tomorrow and look at another of the parables of Jesus.